June 4, 1942. 10:52 a.m. Japanese carrier Hiryu, 150 miles northwest of Midway. Lieutenant Mio Kobayashi's hand shook as he traced points on his navigation map, the pencil poised above coordinates that seemed unfathomable. From the ready room's small window, he watched Admiral Yamaguchi Tamon poring over reconnaissance photos, his face marked not by anger or confusion, but a deepening awareness that a critical error had occurred. Unthinkable. We confirmed her destruction at Coral Sea. I witnessed her aflame, tilting, abandoned. The image displayed an American carrier launching planes. Its unique island profile could be recognized despite the blurry snapshot. 3 carriers. The Americans had 3 carriers present at Midway, not just 2. The assuredness of victory. 4 Japanese carriers facing 2 American had suddenly disappeared. In the Coral Sea, 27 days ago, Japanese aviators had left that identical carrier dying, leaking oil and immobile. Admiral Takagi sent word to Tokyo. Yorktown-class carrier destroyed. The Naval General Staff scratched her off their projections. But here she was, the USS Yorktown, very much intact, already throwing her planes at the Japanese task force. Through the intercom, Kobayashi heard confusion erupt throughout Hiryu with explosive speed. 3 carriers translated to 230 American planes, not merely 150. 3 carriers implied that the ambush scenario was reversed. 3 carriers altered the entire paradigm. Imperial Navy intelligence's judgment on American repair capabilities had failed disastrously. The paradox was undeniable. The presence of Yorktown at Midway blew apart the Imperial Navy's fundamental assumptions about Allied industry. According to their calculations, repairing battle damage took painstaking care, months of labor, and devotion to honorable craftsmanship. A carrier with a 551 lb bomb hole through 5 decks, ruptured fuel storage, and ruined compartments would supposedly need at least 90 days in the top naval yard. These calculations could not be refuted. Only Enterprise and Hornet counted as operational American flattops in the Pacific. Lexington had sunk in the Coral Sea. Saratoga remained under repair for torpedo hits. The new Essex-class fleet carriers wouldn't be available until 1943. Japanese intelligence had repeatedly verified this. Nevertheless, such math became meaningless as SBD Dauntless bombers dug down toward Japanese flight decks. While Admiral Nagumo's staff officers hurriedly recomputed, one central fact arose. They had based the whole of Operation MI on the belief that the Americans were unable to do the very thing they had accomplished. Before the deception at Coral Sea, May 8, 1942, Coral Sea, 500 miles northeast of Australia. The strike had occurred flawlessly. 18 Type 99 dive bombers from the carriers Shoku and Zuikaku zeroed in on USS Yorktown as she emerged from a rain squall. Strike leader Lieutenant Commander Kakuichi Takahashi observed his pilots land a direct hit near the carrier's island. The 250 kilograms bomb punched through the flight deck and detonated 5 decks lower. The explosion could be seen from 10,000 feet up. Yorktown limped away, leaving a 10-meter oil trail and bow down, flames flickering from the holes in her hull. Her speed was now what Japanese spotters gauged as 6 knots. Planes coming back to the Japanese ships reported her irreparably damaged, her list so severe that rescue or repair operations were thought impossible. Photos showed destroyers closing in for recovery missions. Admiral Takagi Teo radioed Combined Fleet HQ. 2 American carriers reported destroyed. Yorktown and Lexington written off. The Emperor was notified. Naval Operations Staff at Kerr removed Yorktown from their orders of battle. In every scenario for the Midway attack, she had ceased to exist. But Captain Elliot Buckmaster, who commanded Yorktown, saw things differently. His vessel slipped away at 20 knots, not the 6 knots that Japanese spotters had calculated, and his crews pulled off their first miracle in damage control. The bomb had killed 66 sailors immediately, wiped out 6 areas, demolished elevator machinery, and smashed fuel tanks over the span of 30 frames. By all standards of naval design, Yorktown deserved months in a dry dock. The road home, the first impossible hurdle, May 8 to 27, 1942. From Coral Sea to Pearl Harbor, the 3,300-mile journey demonstrated the first hint of American technical philosophy. Although Yorktown's destruction was severe, her men rode out the repairs with a mentality alien to Japanese procedures. Make do, make haste, make her fight. Chief Carpenter Boyd Mackenzie paid little heed to the usual guidelines for damage control. Instead of biding time to properly swap out ruined structural girders, a dry dock undertaking, he simply welded steel slabs over the wreckage, producing unsightly but effective fixes. The mechanical regions had stories of their own. The blast destroyed the No. 2 elevator gear and impaired 3 boiler rooms. Engineers rebuilt the systems using whatever they could salvage from the ship's own workshop, fabricated new parts out of sheet metal, and jerry-rigged devices intended for unrelated tasks. Yorktown managed a steady 20 knots, though damage of this scale would customarily restrict her to 12. American submarines radioed her progress to Pearl Harbor. Japanese intelligence picked up those coded transmissions, but interpreted them through their own conventions, figuring a crippled ship meant progress between 5 and 8 knots. Based on their calculations, she couldn't possibly make Pearl Harbor before mid-June, far too late to be of use before the Midway operation scheduled for June 4. Pearl Harbor, where the improbable was made real. May 27, 1942. 1 p.m. The naval base at Pearl Harbor. Yorktown's arrival was a stark revelation. From Diamond Head, a 10-mile oil slick was plainly seen. She leaned to port, smoke curling from makeshift repairs. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch, having personally observed the destruction, had sent a telegram with his assessment. No less than 90 days needed to make her ready for combat. Yet, in May 1942, Pearl Harbor had shifted from a peacetime harbor to something extraordinary. It had become a forward repair base pushing the boundaries of feasibility. The effort to save the battleships lost on December 7 had produced a workforce that measured time in hours rather than in months. Admiral Chester Nimitz was there to meet Yorktown at the pier. In contrast to Japanese admirals who issued commands from battleships located hundreds of miles away, Nimitz waded straight into oil-slicked waters in Dry Dock No. 1, evaluating the destruction himself even as the dock was still filling. His trousers drenched, hands smeared with oil, he addressed Captain Claude Gillette, the superintendent of the yard, and Lieutenant Commander H.J. Finstead, the hull repair specialist. This ship must be ready in 3 days. The silence that ensued felt unending. Finstead eventually swallowed and responded, "Yes, sir. Station Hypo, the intelligence necessity." The 3-day window was not a random choice. In the basement of Building 1, merely 400 yards from the dry dock, Commander Joseph Rochefort at Station Hypo had broken JN-25, the Japanese Naval Operations Code. They found out that AF signified Midway. They identified June 4 as the attack date. They learned the Japanese battle plan. 4 carriers from the 1st Air Fleet. Most importantly, they understood the Japanese anticipated facing only Enterprise and Hornet. According to Japanese belief, Yorktown was destroyed. This information changed Yorktown's repairs from important to vital. Without her, the Americans would encounter odds of 4-2. With her, 3 against 4 still tough, but at least plausible. The 72-hour sprint, May 28, 5:30 a.m. in Dry Dock No. 1. Even before the dock was completely emptied of water, while it still swirled around their ankles, 1,400 men boarded Yorktown. They represented every trade on the base: electricians, welders, shipfitters, machinists, pipefitters, and sheet metal workers. Several had just worked through the previous night on other ships. They would labor for a full 72 hours. The repair operation contradicted Japanese industrial norms. Instead of meticulous scheduling and a strict chain of command, the watchword here was organized chaos. Supervisors made snap decisions. Workers switched trades as required. The only directive: get her battle ready. The methods utilized would have alarmed Japanese ship designers. The bomb damage. A 551-pound bomb had torn destruction from the flight deck through 5 separate levels. According to Japanese procedures, that would mean cutting away the ruined metal, crafting and installing new pieces, restoring each deck. This would have taken 30 days. Pearl Harbor's methodology. Leave the wreckage in place, weld thick plates right on top, brace damaged sections with timber scavenged from ongoing construction. Time required: 18 hours. The fuel tank damage from bomb shock had burst tanks across a span of 30 frames, leading to fouled fuel stores. Japanese standards dictated draining, cleansing, inspection, and individual restoration. This would need 2 weeks. The Americans' method: pump out compromised fuel, plug broken tanks with fast-setting cement intended for repairing runways, weld plating over damaged spots, and disregard tanks too far gone to fix, rapidly seal them off entirely. Time needed: 11 hours. The machinery. 3 boiler rooms were struck. Superheat capability declined by 70%. Top speed limited to 27 knots, not 32.5 as designed. Under Japanese protocols, this demanded total replacement. Pearl Harbor's fix: skip the superheater restoration, accept lower speed, focus on getting the main systems running. Time: 14 hours. The reality for the repair crews. Lewis Walters, a 21-year-old electrician, remembered, proper fixes weren't possible. We ran electrical lines over the open decks rather than threading through conduits. We welded plates right over holes without replacing what was lost. Temporary, unattractive, but it functioned. The math of repair: 20 tons of steel plate welded in place, 35 miles of electrical cables installed, 400 tons of dirty fuel removed, 3 wrecked compartments sealed, and the constant arc welding drew so much current that rolling blackouts hit Oahu. Crews ate meals at their posts and dozed in 15-minute intervals against bulkheads. When the welding drained so much electricity that hospitals had interruptions, the island's population accepted the planned outages without protest. When additional timber was required, local construction firms supplied it with no questions asked. The repairs to the hull went against conventional naval wisdom. Broken seams were plugged with wood, shielded with steel, and then welded into a solid patch, a metal scab, as one engineer described. Electrical jobs ignored usual procedure. Cables snaked across decks, through hatchways, and along ceilings. Departure: May 30, 1942. At 9 a.m., Yorktown left the harbor while shipyard workers kept at their tasks, fixing what they could as the ship got underway. These laborers disembarked once she exited the harbor. The air group that gathered on her flight deck was proof of adaptability. Bombing Squadron 3 arrived from USS Saratoga. Torpedo Squadron 3 was hastily assembled from the remaining members. Fighting Squadron 3 merged pilots from 3 squadrons who had never operated as one. As Yorktown steamed away, the men who achieved the impossible stood on the quay. Chief Hull Technician Finstead reflected later, "We sent her out like a boxer patched up between rounds. She didn't look pretty, but she could hit back." Point Luck Rendezvous, June 2, 1942. 325 miles northeast of Midway, Yorktown joined Enterprise and Hornet at Point Luck. The crews of the other carriers were in disbelief. Commander WDE McCluskey, Air Group Commander for Enterprise, later said, "We all knew Yorktown had been struck at Coral Sea and thought she might trail behind as a backup. Yet there she was, launching planes, conducting air operations, seemingly ready for action." Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, using Yorktown as his flagship, grasped something essential. Yorktown's appearance wasn't simply about numbers, it was about overturning Japanese expectations. In his closing briefing, Fletcher told his officers, "The Japanese have orchestrated this for months, every factor calculated for 2 carriers. When our aircraft reach their ships, their certainty ends." Japanese certainty. On the Akagi, Admiral Nagumo Chuichi coordinated the last details with utmost assurance. 4 carriers Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, Hōryū fielding 248 planes against 2 American carriers with 150 aircraft. They were combat veterans of Pearl Harbor, prepared to face Americans who had yet to secure a carrier victory. Captain Minoru Jinda, Nagumo's chief of air operations, had simulated every possibility. Even if the Americans obtained surprise, Japanese pilots' superiority and their numerical edge would secure victory. The only factor that could modify this equation was a third U.S. carrier, and Japanese intelligence declared that to be impossible. Yorktown was finished. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, leader of the Pearl Harbor attack, was bedridden with appendicitis but was present as an observer. Years later, he reflected, "Our entire strategy relied on intelligence that the Americans possessed 2 carriers, not about 2, not maybe 3, exactly 2. If this was wrong, then the entire plan was wrong." June 4 marked the breaking point. At 4:30 a.m., Japanese carriers deployed 108 planes toward Midway. The day unfolded as anticipated. Nagumo kept 108 planes in reserve, prepared to strike the American fleet, sure of his trap. At 7:10 a.m., a Japanese reconnaissance aircraft reported back. An American carrier was spotted. 1 carrier was anticipated. Nagumo directed his reserve aircraft to be equipped with torpedoes for an assault on ships. Confusion followed. The scout indicated that there might actually be 2 carriers, yet this was still within expectations. At 8:20 a.m., a torpedo squadron attack commenced. 8 planes from Hornet launched their offensive. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led a force of 15 TBD Devastators against the Japanese carriers without any fighter protection. Every one of the 15 was destroyed. Only Ensign George Gay made it out alive. However, Waldron's loss brought the Japanese combat air patrol down to the waves. At 8:40 a.m., Enterprise's Torpedo Squadron 6 proceeded with their attack. Of 14 Devastators, 10 were lost. No successful hits were achieved. But once more, the Zero fighters were lured close to the surface. By 9:15 a.m., a torpedo group from Yorktown attacked. This became the pivotal moment. As another 12 Devastators began their assault runs, Japanese spotters counted more incoming planes than expected. The figures didn't add up. There were 3 U.S. carriers, not just 2. On Hōryū's bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi did the math quickly. 3 enemy carriers altered the entire situation. Before he could update his instructions, and before the Japanese fleet could react, dive bombers appeared. At 10:22 a.m., the crucial turning point arrived. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, heading Yorktown's Bombing Squadron 3, had lost his way, but located the Japanese by tracking the wake left by a destroyer. His 17 Solomon Islands Dauntless bombers reached the Japanese fleet simultaneously with Enterprise's dive bombers, not through strategy but due to Yorktown's delayed sortie caused by damaged boilers. From 14,000 feet, Leslie observed the 4 Japanese carriers below, their decks crowded with fueled and armed airplanes. Their defensive fighters were at low altitude. In just 6 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers went up in flames. Sōryū, which Leslie's squadron hit with 3 bombs, erupted into fire, visible from 50 miles away. Japanese retaliation targeted a Phantom. On Hōryū, Admiral Yamaguchi faced staggering odds. 3 American carriers remained, while only his ship survived. Even so, he dispatched 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters to strike the nearest American carrier, Yorktown. As they advanced, Flight Leader Lieutenant Mo Kobayashi examined the target through binoculars and felt unsettled. The superstructure, layout of the flight deck, this was Yorktown, believed sunk at Coral Sea. By 12:05 p.m., 3 bombs had struck Yorktown, igniting fires and rupturing steam pipes. The vessel lost all power. For the second time in 27 days, Japanese aviators left Yorktown damaged and seemingly destroyed. Yet, despite burning, Yorktown had already shifted the balance. Her morning raid had doomed Sōryū. By absorbing Hōryū's retaliation, she shielded Enterprise and Hornet for the strike that would later destroy Hōryū 4 hours later. Exceptional work in damage control followed. Captain Buckmaster called for a damage inspection. The hasty, unsightly fixes from Pearl Harbor endured. The welded metal held firm. Chief Engineer John F. Delaney stated, "The Japanese bombs hit us hard, but Pearl Harbor's repairs are secure. Give me 2 hours." Within 60 minutes, 3 boilers had been rekindled, flames brought under control, and counter-flooding lessened the ship's list. At 1:40 p.m., Yorktown was moving at 19 knots in refueling fighters, looking restored enough that when Hōryū's second air raid hit at 2:30 p.m., the attackers believed they faced a completely different, undamaged carrier. The second wave brought more confusion. At 2:30 p.m., Lieutenant Tomonaga Joichi led the last 5 torpedo bombers Hōryū could launch, expecting to locate a burning Yorktown. Instead, he discovered a carrier underway launching planes. His unclear report to Hōryū led Japanese officers to consider the possibility of 4 U.S. carriers. Though Tomonaga's torpedoes would eventually seal Yorktown's fate, the confusion delayed a coordinated response, allowing Enterprise's dive bombers to strike and destroy Hōryū. By 5 p.m. the climax unfolded. On June 6 at 1:31 p.m., Japanese submarine I-168, under Lieutenant Commander Yohachi Tanabe, found Yorktown being towed. Tanabe launched 4 torpedoes. Yorktown took 2 hits, while destroyer USS Hammond, positioned alongside, was also struck. When Yorktown capsized on June 7, Tanabe recorded in his log that he had likely sunk the Saratoga. Even in demise, Yorktown spread uncertainty. The Japanese never truly realized that the carrier present at Midway was the same one they believed destroyed at Coral Sea. The figures bear it out. The Japanese calculated that similar damage to Yorktown would require 90 to 120 days to fix. The American peacetime standard was 30 to 45 days. In reality, Yorktown was repaired in 72 hours. Workmen totaled 1,400 laboring non-stop. 85% of fighting capacity was restored. The outcome: the Japanese counted on 4 carriers against 2 for absolute victory. In truth, it was 4 against 3, a more even contest. Ultimately, 4 Japanese carriers went down, only 1 American. Results multiplied. Yorktown's airmen definitively destroyed Sōryū. 2 Japanese waves directed at Yorktown would otherwise have targeted the Enterprise or Hornet. 75 Japanese aircraft were lost while attacking her. Japan's ability to carry out offensive missions was permanently broken. Eyewitnesses provided their perspectives. Since then, those involved recounted what Yorktown's presence signified. Japanese Commander Mitsuo Fuchida recalled, "The arrival of a 3rd carrier shattered all plans. Every calculation relied on there being just 2 carriers. When observers reported a quantity of torpedo aircraft surpassing 2 carriers' capability, it was clear something was fundamentally wrong. By the time anyone grasped the reality, 3 carriers were engulfed in fire." Aviation machinist Tom Cheek of the USS Enterprise recalled, "Once Yorktown turned up at Point Luck, grown men shouted for joy. We all knew she was badly damaged at Coral Sea, yet she stood before us, mended and battle-ready." Electrician Wayne Morrison of Pearl Harbor remembered, "The news that Yorktown helped take down 3 Japanese carriers before suffering strikes herself silenced the shipyard. Then someone began to applaud. Quickly, 10,000 workers joined in. Those 3 days held immense meaning. Japanese realization grew slowly. In time, they pieced together the events, but true understanding took years to mature." Admiral Matō Mugaki, Yamamoto's chief of staff, recorded in his diary that Yorktown's presence at Midway was not coincidental. It owed to preparation. Somehow, the Americans had divined our intentions. The 3-day repair was not mere luck, but a result of intelligence. In 1962, Lieutenant Commander Tanner Bay visited Pearl Harbor's Dry Dock No. 1, where Yorktown had received repairs. He stood quietly before it for a long time, finally observing, "Now it makes sense. We weren't up against just a country. We were fighting a concept that anything could be attained with enough effort." We valued spirit. Americans believed in the power of properly applied material resources. Admiral Shigeru Fukuda noted in his memoirs, "Yorktown assured us that defeat was inevitable before the war even truly began. Any nation repairing such devastation in 3 days stood no chance of being overcome by one needing 3 months. It was a matter of numbers." Yorktown's restoration exposed fundamental disparities in repair philosophies. The Japanese approach was centered on perfection, mastery, and meticulous detail. Damaged vessels had to be returned to their original state, regardless of time consumed. Americans emphasized utility, speed, and improvisation. Damaged ships needed to return to the fight, not be visually flawless. Time meant everything. These differences extended beyond repairing ships. Japan produced finely crafted planes, engineered with perfection in mind. The United States built sufficiently capable planes by the thousands, all interchangeable and able to be fixed with whatever components were handy. Station Hypo's intelligence work made Yorktown's restoration urgent, and the rapid repair transformed the intelligence into something actionable. Without Yorktown, Admirals Nimitz and Fletcher might not have risked engagement. With her, the odds became acceptable. Commander Rochefort remarked later, "Decoding enemy messages meant little if we weren't able to act on them. Yorktown gave us that ability." The workers in the dockyard proved to be as crucial as the codebreakers. The longer-term effect was profound. Yorktown's restoration changed naval damage control doctrine, valuing speed over flawlessness, function over appearance, and adaptability over rigid procedures. The Yorktown standard was established. Any vessel staying afloat could be saved. The achievement also displayed American industrial resolve. The men who fixed Yorktown in 3 days typified those who would later construct Liberty ships in just 4 days, B-24 bombers in just over an hour, and ultimately, the atomic bomb in 3 years. Acknowledgement came post-war. In 1985, survivors of Pearl Harbor's repair crews gathered with Yorktown sailors in Hawaii to mark the battle's anniversary. Lewis Walters, an electrician who worked 72 hours wiring the ship, met with Tom Lee, a gunner whose life depended on those wires. "Your wiring kept me alive," Lee said. "When the initial bomb struck and main power failed, the emergency lines you installed ensured my guns stayed operational." Walters replied, "We always pictured someone's child relying on our work, each weld, every cable, each patch. We knew it would matter." Admiral Nimitz delivered the final judgment. After the conflict, he noted that the 3 days Yorktown spent in dry dock may have counted as the most consequential days in the Pacific theater, not because of the repair itself, remarkable as it was, but for what it symbolized. It showcased American democracy in action, the commitment of its workers, and the immense capacity of industry. The Japanese had come to Midway expecting to face a slow, soft, and divided America. Instead, they encountered a nation that was fast, determined, and unified. Yorktown was the clear evidence. The vessel they thought crippled appeared in fighting form. Seeing Yorktown's aircraft above their own ships meant they witnessed not only American planes, but the manifestation of national resolve. They saw a future shaped by unmatched industry and human tenacity. Yorktown's repair crew didn't just restore a warship. They demonstrated a collective ability that would win the war. Across those 3 days, the workers at Pearl Harbor illustrated that in America, the impossible was merely something waiting to be done. The figures that mark triumph. The ultimate tally exposes the hard mathematics. Outlay: 72 hours of work, 1,400 laborers, $2.2 million allocated to materials, 3 days taken away from alternate assignments. Result: 1 Japanese carrier unquestionably sent to the bottom by Yorktown's planes. 2 Japanese attacks withstood. 322 Japanese planes eliminated during the clash. 3,057 Japanese crew members lost. Japan's ability to attack conclusively neutralized. Illustration: American repairs surpassed Japanese predictions by a margin of 3,000%. The concept of swift repairs confirmed. New benchmarks for damage control established. sparked a push for faster output across American manufacturing. The persistent mystery for Japan. One puzzle lingered. By what means did the Americans realize Yorktown needed such urgent repairs? How did they anticipate Midway's assault would commence on June 4? The explanation, that U.S. codebreakers were intercepting Japanese communications in real time, remained a secret for decades. Yet, even without knowledge of codebreaking, Yorktown's appearance at just the right instant should have revealed everything. The Americans were fully aware of their opponent's strategy. Lasting significance. Today's United States Navy continues to teach the importance of Yorktown's story. Velocity outweighs flawlessness. Creativity surpasses rigid plans. The adversary will not wait for completely finished repairs. Modern doctrines of damage control, prioritizing rapid recovery over total restoration, stem directly from the 72-hour dry dock overhaul of Yorktown. Every Navy member hears the account. Each specialist in damage control learns the expectations. Summary from Captain Buckmaster. Yorktown's commanding officer arguably said it best. The Japanese assumed we would stick to regulations. Their timetable for repairs, yet as Americans, we don't conform to rules. We invent our own as situations demand. Our sole guiding principle. Yorktown would fight at Midway. The men at Pearl Harbor did not perform a miracle. They demonstrated American industrial democracy. Chaotic, ad hoc, imperfect, but relentless. They put my ship back together however they could. The result wasn't elegant. It didn't meet all standards, but it was ready to sail. When we departed on May 30th, Yorktown was not the exact vessel she had been at Coral Sea. She had become something different. Part original equipment, part resourcefulness, part grit. She represented the United States itself, damaged, but undefeated, patched up, but not destroyed, prepared to engage. The Japanese at Midway encountered more than 3 carriers. They faced American resolve forged into steel, and everything began with 72 hours at dry dock when the unimaginable became reality. Epilogue. The takeaway from 3 days. USS Yorktown now rests 16,650 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean surface, found by Robert Ballard in 1998. She remains upright, bearing the marks of battle. The emergency repairs made at Pearl Harbor are still evident. Steel plates welded in place, gaps patched, unsightly yet effective repairs that enabled her to fight at Midway. At the Pearl Harbor Dry Dock No. 1, a plaque commemorates, here, in 72 hours, American workers achieved the impossible, restoring USS Yorktown for the Midway battle. Their efforts altered the course of history. The attack on Pearl Harbor roused a sleeping giant. At Midway, the world witnessed what that giant could accomplish when fully awakened. Defy the impossible, surpass belief, appear unexpectedly. Lieutenant Commander Tanub, who struck the fatal blow to Yorktown, grasped too late the real challenge he had encountered. We believed we fought ships and aircraft. What we actually fought was a spirit that rejected the very notion of impossibility. The laborers who defied the odds remained almost unknown. There were no medals for the welders, no accolades for those laying cable, no honor for patching bulkheads. They simply resumed their work, fixing ships and helping win the war one task at a time. But those 72 hours transformed the outcome of history. By showing Yorktown could be brought back in 3 days, they proved that the United States could achieve anything it willed. By dispatching a hastily mended carrier to Midway, they broadcast a global message. American industrial strength meant more than just manufacturing power. It embodied perseverance, creativity, and a total unwillingness to yield. The Yorktown's timely arrival at Midway amounted to more than catching the enemy off guard. It illustrated that democracy's greatest asset was not arms or ammunition. It was American laborers equipped with a welding torch and 3 short days to accomplish the impossible. And they met that challenge. The saga of Yorktown's comeback serves as an immortal example of what a free people can do when united in effort. In only 72 hours, American workers did more than restore a battleship. They proved that resolve and inventiveness could triumph over every hardship. that achieving operational status took precedence over aesthetics, and that the impending fight mattered far more than adherence to outdated procedures. The bewildered Japanese leaders who saw Yorktown at Midway confronted evidence of more than simple repairs. They confronted progress itself, a future where free industry would overcome strict militarism, where innovative thinking would directly counter inflexibility, where voluntarily committed labor outperformed compelled effort. Yorktown sank on June 7, 1942. Yet what she embodied ascended from the depths and went on to influence the rest of the conflict. Every prompt fix, every improbable deadline reached, every solution born from resourcefulness rather than strict orders all link back to those 3 May days when 1,400 American laborers proved that the term impossible was only a starting point. The apparition that unsettled Japanese flyers at Midway was no myth. It stood for something greater, tangible proof that the United States, once fully mobilized, could accomplish any feat. The workers were unaware they were making history. They simply understood a job awaited them and 3 days to finish it. In those 3 days, they not only restored a carrier, they proved a doctrine that would carry America through the conflict and beyond. That a people joined by a shared aim could fulfill what seemed unreachable. That ideal, built into the ship's very steel and launched into combat, helped shift the course of war at Midway. It endures as the nation's enduring advantage, not advanced weapons or boundless materials, but an unwavering belief that with enough effort, intelligence, and haste, any problem is solvable. The Japanese did not grasp this truth until the opportunity had slipped away. They calculated in months, while Americans worked by the hour. They chased flawlessness, while for Americans, victory was paramount. They stuck to protocol, while Americans improvised as necessary. Ultimately, 3 days in a repair dock determined the future of the Pacific conflict. 72 hours that conclusively proved the greatest strength of the Allied cause was not armaments or governmental structure alone, but the union of both. Free workers choosing to do what others called impossible, and then making it reality.